The morning started like any other for Daniel. He lived in a quiet little town, far from the city noise, surrounded by fields, trees, and the sound of birds. It was peaceful, just the way he liked it. He got up early, made himself a cup of coffee, and stepped outside to feed his dog. Max, the sun was just rising, painting the sky orange and gold. Everything seemed normal, but that peace didn't last long. As Daniel walked toward the fence, Max began barking like crazy. The dog's fur stood up, and he wouldn't go near the back corner of the yard. Daniel frowned and followed Max's gaze. That's when he saw it, a large hole right next to his garden fence. It hadn't been there the day before. The ground looked torn open, and a thin mist rose from the darkness below. Daniel froze for a moment. The hole was so deep that he couldn't see the bottom, and its edges were smooth, like something had cut straight through the earth. He took a few careful steps closer, his boots crunching on the loose dirt. The hole was big, maybe 10 feet wide, and almost perfectly round. He dropped a small rock inside to see how deep it went. He waited for the sound of it hitting the bottom, but there was nothing. Not a single echo. That silence made his skin crawl. It didn't make sense. There hadn't been any earthquakes, no heavy rain, nothing that could have caused such a hole overnight. By now, Max was barking non-stop, refusing to come any closer. Daniel felt a strange chill, even though the sun was rising higher. Something about the hole felt wrong. He went back inside, grabbed his phone, and tried to shine its flashlight into the darkness, but the beam didn't reach far. The light just disappeared, swallowed by the blackness below. Within an hour, few of Daniel's neighbors had come by after hearing the news. In small towns, word spreads fast. Old Mr. Lewis from across the road said it might be an old mining shaft. There were miners here, back in the day, he said, scratching his gray beard. Could have been sealed, then opened again. Daniel shook his head. The ground around his home had never shown any sign of tunnels or mines. Another neighbor, a young woman named Sarah, suggested it was a sinkhole caused by rainwater washing away the soil underneath. But even she looked unconvinced. The hole didn't look natural. They all stood around it, peering into the darkness, trying to guess what could be inside. One kid from down the street threw in a stick, hoping to hear it land. Again, no sound. Just emptiness. The group exchanged uneasy glances. Someone joked that it looked like an entrance to another world. Nobody laughed. As the day went on, more people stopped by to see it. Some took pictures. Others just stared, whispering. A few of them told Daniel to call the local authorities, but he hesitated. He didn't want a bunch of officials digging up his property. He thought maybe it was just a weird natural thing and it would settle down soon. When everyone finally left, Daniel sat on his porch with Max by his side, still watching the hole from a distance. The wind had picked up, and every now and then he thought he heard something, a faint sound, deep down below. It was like a low hum, steady and strange, like a machine running far underground. He tried to tell himself it was just the wind echoing inside, but the more he listened, the less it sounded natural. As evening came, the air grew colder. The crickets started chirping, and the town went quiet. Daniel went back outside one last time to check the hole. The mist had returned, thicker now, almost glowing faintly under the moonlight. Max growled low, his tail tucked between his legs. Daniel crouched near the edge, holding his flashlight again. He aimed it inside and saw something move, or at least he thought he did. A small reflection like light bouncing off metal, but when he adjusted the beam, it vanished. He backed away quickly, his heart beating faster. He didn't know what he saw, but he suddenly didn't want to be near it anymore. The air felt heavy, and the humming grew just a bit louder, enough to make him feel dizzy. He turned around and went back to the house, locking the door behind him. For the first time in years, he kept the lights on all night. Inside, Daniel tried to distract himself. He turned on the TV, made another cup of coffee, and tried to convince himself it was nothing serious. Maybe just a weird hole, nothing to worry about. But deep down, he knew something was off. He could still hear that faint humming sound even from inside the house. It was as if the earth itself was alive, breathing just below his home around midnight. Max began barking again, sharp, loud, desperate barks that echoed through the rooms. Daniel jumped up and ran to the window. The dog was standing by the back door, staring at the hole, growling low. Daniel turned off the TV and listened carefully. The humming was louder now, mixed with something else, like a pulse, steady and rhythmic. He thought for a moment that he could feel it, soft vibration running through the floor. He stepped outside again, flashlight in hand. The air felt strange, colder than before. The mist was thicker, almost like smoke now, drifting from the hole and spreading across the yard. Daniel's heart raced as he aimed his light toward the pit once more. The beam cut through the mist, and for a split second, he thought he saw something metallic glinting far below. Maybe pipes, maybe machinery, maybe something else. But before he could focus, the light flickered and went out completely. He stood frozen, staring into the darkness. Max whimpered behind him. For a long moment, Daniel didn't move. Then he took a slow step back, then another, until he was safely inside the house again. He shut the door, pulled the curtains closed, and leaned against the wall, breathing hard. What was that hole? Why did it hum? And why did it feel like something inside it was? Waiting, he barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the dark hole and the faint blue mist rising from it. He heard that deep humming echoing in his mind. When morning finally came, he was exhausted but relieved to see daylight again. He opened the curtains slowly. The hole was still there, silent now, just a dark wound in the earth. The mist was gone, the air still. It looked harmless in the sunlight, almost normal. But Daniel knew what he had heard, what he had felt. He told himself he wouldn't go near it again. But deep down, curiosity was already growing inside him. He couldn't stop thinking about what was down there, hidden in that darkness. Every sound, every vibration made him wonder if something was alive beneath his feet. And though he didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of something far bigger than he could ever imagine. The next morning, Daniel woke up tired. He hadn't slept well all night. The strange humming sound still echoed in his head. The hole outside his house was the first thing on his mind when he opened his eyes. For a moment, he thought maybe it had been a dream. Maybe there was no hole at all. But when he stepped outside with his cup of coffee, the sight of that dark, silent pit waiting near his garden fence told him it was very real. The morning air was cold, and a thin mist still hovered over the hole. Max refused to go anywhere near it, stayed by the porch, growling softly, his eyes locked on the darkness below. The sunlight didn't reach inside. It was as if the hole swallowed the light. The earth around it looked untouched, no sign of collapse, no cracks spreading out, just a perfect, deep circle going down into nothingness. He tried to distract himself by working on his old truck in the driveway, but his mind kept drifting back to that hole. The sound, the mist, the glint of metal he thought he sit wouldn't leave him alone. He had always been a curious man, the kind who liked to fix things and understand how they worked, and now this mystery was right in his own backyard. He needed to know what it was. By afternoon, he made up his mind. He went into his shed and gathered a few things: a thick rope, a flashlight, his old gloves, and a small camera he used for work. He wasn't planning to go too deep, just far enough to see what was down there. He tied the rope tightly around the trunk of a strong tree near the edge, double-checking the knot. His hands trembled slightly as he worked, but he told himself it was just nerves. Max barked as Daniel approached the hole. The dog's barks grew louder, almost like he was warning him not to go. "It's okay, buddy," Daniel said softly, though his voice didn't sound convincing even to himself. He looped the rope around his waist, took a deep breath, and switched on the flashlight. The beam cut through the mist, but still didn't show the bottom. It was like shining a light into the ocean, nothing but darkness beyond a few feet. Daniel started lowering himself slowly. The air inside the hole was cool and damp. Smell of wet earth filled his nose. As he descended, his flashlight beam brushed against the walls, and he noticed something strange. The dirt wasn't rough or jagged like he expected. It was smooth, almost polished. It looked like the sides of the tunnel had been carved or melted by something not naturally formed. He kept going, one cautious step at a time, his boots pressing against the wall for support. The rope creaked slightly under his weight. After about 15 feet, he stopped to catch his breath and shone the flashlight below him. That's when he noticed the tunnel wasn't straight down anymore. It curved gently, spiraling into the earth like a winding staircase. The walls shimmered faintly, reflecting his light in odd ways. His heart pounded in his chest. But curiosity pushed him forward. He adjusted the rope and began following the spiral path downward. The deeper he went, the quieter the world above became. The humming sound he had heard last night was back, but clearer now. It wasn't loud, just a steady vibration, like a deep mechanical heartbeat. As he walked, he noticed small metallic fragments sticking out of the walls. Some were rusty, others smooth and shiny, as if they were part of some old machine buried long ago. He reached out and touched one piece. It felt warm, even though the air around him was cold. He pulled his hand back quickly, breathing fast. "What the hell?" he whispered under his breath. He aimed his flashlight ahead and froze. Was movement just a flicker, like a shadow passing quickly through the tunnel? He tightened his grip on the flashlight and waited, listening. The hum continued, steady and calm, but he couldn't hear any footsteps or breathing. Maybe it was just his imagination. Maybe the beam of his light had caught dust or mist. He took another step forward, forcing himself to keep going. After what felt like hours, he reached a wide opening. His flashlight beam spread out across a large underground chamber. The walls here weren't dirt. They were made of some kind of dark metallic material. The floor was covered in a thin layer of dust, and in the center of the room stood a structure. It looked like a machine, half buried in the ground, glowing faintly with blue light. Daniel's mouth went dry. He walked closer, his footsteps echoing softly. The structure was circular, maybe 20 feet wide, with strange patterns etched into its surface. The blue light came from cracks running along its sides, pulsing slowly like it was alive. He raised his camera and snapped a few pictures, though his hands were shaking so badly the images came out blurry. He crouched near the base of the machine, brushing away some dirt. Underneath, found what looked like a smooth metal plate, with symbols he didn't recognize, nothing like any language he had ever seen. He reached out to touch it, and the hum suddenly grew louder. The blue light flickered, brighter now. Daniel stumbled back in shock. The ground beneath him vibrated slightly. Panic began to set in. He turned around, shining the flashlight toward the tunnel. For a second, he thought he saw something else, another tunnel, branching off in the darkness. Maybe even more machines hidden beyond. But he didn't stay to find out. He grabbed the rope and started climbing back up, his breathing heavy, his heart racing faster with every step. The hum followed him, faint but constant. Like something was watching him leave. By the time he reached the surface, the sun was already setting. He crawled out of the hole, covered in dirt, gasping for air. Max barked and ran to him, licking his face, wagging his tail nervously. Daniel sat there for a moment, staring at the hole, his mind spinning. What had he just seen? It wasn't a natural formation. It wasn't just dirt and rock. Something was buried under his home, something built by hands. Or maybe by something else entirely. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked around. The world felt different now. The sky looked darker, the air heavier. He grabbed his camera and checked the photos. Most of them were blurred, but one image showed part of the glowing blue light and the edge of the metal wall. It was proof that what he saw was real. As night fell, Daniel stood by the hole again, listening. The hum was softer now, almost like it was fading away, retreating deeper underground. Not to seal it over the hole, not to seal it, but to hide it for the night. He didn't want anyone wandering near it until he figured out what to do inside. The house, he sat down with a shaking hand and wrote down everything he had seen. He wanted to remember every detail, the spiral tunnel, the smooth walls, the strange machine. But the part that scared him the most wasn't what he saw, it was what he felt. When he touched the metal, it didn't feel cold or lifeless. It felt like something that had been waiting. Before going to bed, Daniel looked out the window one last time. The backyard was quiet, the hole barely visible in the moonlight. For now, everything seemed normal again. But deep down, he knew that something under his home had awakened. And sooner or later, the world was going to notice. The next morning, Daniel woke up feeling uneasy. His body was sore from the climb. His mind couldn't stop replaying what he had seen underground the smooth metal walls. The strange blue light, the humming sound that had followed him all the way up. He kept thinking about that machine buried in the earth. It didn't feel man-made, at least not by anyone in his town. Maybe not even from his time. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the pictures on his phone. Most were blurry, but a few showed the faint blue glow and the curved metal surface. He felt a chill just looking at them. He knew what he saw was real, but would anyone believe him? Probably not. Still, something inside him said he needed to tell someone. So, he called the local authorities. When Daniel explained what he found, the officer on the phone sounded doubtful. A giant hole with glowing walls. He repeated, half laughing. "Sir, are you sure it's not an old water pipe or a mining shaft?" Daniel insisted it wasn't. Eventually they agreed to send someone to check by noon. A small team of local officials arrived, a policeman, a geologist, and a few engineers from the town council. They came with tape, cameras, and measuring tools. Daniel led them to the backyard, where the hole was still covered with the tarp he had tied down the night before. When he pulled the tarp away, everyone went silent. The hole was there, dark and deep, just as before. The geologist leaned over and whistled softly. "That's strange," he said. "Looks too round for a natural sinkhole." One of the engineers shone a powerful light down the hole, but the beam vanished into the blackness. "How deep did you say this goes?" he asked. Daniel told them he had gone down and found metal structures. The group exchanged surprised looks. They lowered a small camera tied to a wire. The monitor showed the tunnel walls, smooth, spiral, shining faintly under the flashlight. Then the camera reached the chamber at the bottom. When the image of the glowing blue machine appeared on the screen, the geologist's face went pale. The room went silent. The hum could even be heard through the speakers, soft but steady. "This isn't geological," one engineer muttered. "Something else." They quickly began marking the area, setting up barriers, and taking samples of the surrounding soil. But within an hour, Daniel noticed their behavior change. They started making phone calls, speaking in low voices, and one of them told Daniel to stand back. When he asked what they found, no one answered. Soon, 2 black SUVs arrived. Men in dark suits stepped out, people Daniel had never seen before. They carried equipment and wore badges that didn't look local. Without much explanation, they ordered everyone, including Daniel, to move away from the site. They began covering the hole and placing warning signs around it. "This is now a restricted area," one of them said firmly. Daniel was confused and angry. "Restricted? This is my property," he argued. But the man only gave him a cold look. "Sir, for your safety and others, we have to secure this location. It's a matter of public concern." They refused to say more. By evening, trucks arrived carrying metal panels and heavy tarps. The hole was completely sealed off. That night, Daniel couldn't believe what was happening. His backyard was now surrounded by strange vehicles and men with radios. Neighbors came by asking questions, but no one from the team spoke to them. Rumors began spreading across the town. Some said it was an old military bunker. Others whispered about hidden alien technology. One old man swore he saw a blue light glowing through the cracks before they covered it. When Daniel tried to check the site the next morning, 2 guards stopped him. "No entry," one said sharply. He demanded to know what they were doing, but they just told him to go back inside. They treated him like he was a problem instead of the person who found it. By the end of the day, news vans began showing up. Reporters stood outside his gate asking questions. "Mr. Daniel, is it true you found a sinkhole with glowing lights?" One shouted, "Did the government take something from your property?" Another asked. Daniel didn't know what to say. The men at the site had warned him not to talk about it, but he also didn't want to stay silent. When he finally gave a short statement, he only said, "I found something strange underground. The authorities are handling it now." He didn't mention the blue light or the hum. He didn't mention how the officials acted once they saw the footage. But even that small statement was enough to make the story spread online. Within hours, people all over the internet were talking about the mystery pit in Havenfield that night. As the media lights faded and the reporters left, Daniel sat alone on his porch. The men in black had packed up most of their gear and left, but they left behind a tall metal fence around the site. A single guard remained, sitting inside a parked SUV watching the area. The hum was gone now. Everything was too quiet. As Daniel stared at the fenced-off area, a car pulled up to his driveway. A woman stepped out, wearing a plain jacket and glasses. She looked nervous. "Mr. Daniel?" she asked softly. "I'm Dr. Harper. I was part of the geology team. Yesterday." Daniel remembered. Her from the morning before, the young scientist, who had seemed genuinely curious. Before the men in suits arrived, she looked around, to make sure no one was listening. Then she said in a low voice, "What you found down there? It's not natural." Daniel frowned. "Then what is it?" She hesitated. "I don't know everything, but I saw the readings from the instruments before they took them. That thing down there is generating energy, something powerful. It's active, like it's alive." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "Alive?" he repeated. Dr. Harper nodded slightly. "The officials who came there, not just engineers, their military science division. They've been waiting for something like this. They knew what to look for." He stared at her, trying to understand. "You're saying they already knew this was here?" She bit her lip and whispered, "There are files, classified ones. It's about underground structures from the 1970s. They called them containment vaults. But nobody was supposed to find one again." Before Daniel could ask more, she turned toward her car. "I shouldn't even be here," she said. "They're watching everything. But I thought you deserved to know. Please, be careful. Don't talk about this too much. They won't like it." Then she drove away, leaving him standing there in the fading light, her words echoing in his mind. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep again. The hum was gone, but he could still feel it in his chest, like a vibration that never really stopped. He looked through his phone and found the picture again, the one showing the blue glow. He zoomed in, staring at the curved lines and strange symbols on the metal. The more he looked, the more it felt like the design wasn't random. It looked intentional, like writing. He wondered what the scientists were doing now under that sealed cover. Were they studying it? Or trying to keep it hidden? And if it wasn't natural, what if it wasn't human either? As the clock ticked past midnight, Daniel stepped outside. The yard was quiet. The guards were gone now, and the air was still. He walked to the fence and looked toward the covered site. The moonlight glinted off the metal panels. Everything looked peaceful, but Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that deep beneath the earth, that machine was still there, humming quietly in the dark, waiting for something or someone to wake it again. Within a few days, the story of the strange hole spread everywhere. It was no longer just a small-town mystery. It had become national news. Reporters filled the streets of Havenfield, holding microphones and cameras, asking anyone who passed by if they had seen the glowing pit or heard the humming sound. Some people claimed they saw blue light coming from the ground. Others said they heard strange vibrations at night. The whole town buzzed with excitement and fear. Daniel stayed mostly inside his house. He didn't trust the men who had taken over his property. He didn't like the way they watched him whenever he stepped outside. There were guards posted near the hole now, wearing black uniforms with no names or symbols. Every time Daniel tried to go near the fence, someone would stop him. They said it was for his safety. But he knew better. They weren't protecting him. They were hiding something. He spent hours reading online articles about the event. Most news channels called it the Mystery Pit of Havenfield. Some said it was an old military experiment. Others thought it might be a natural cave releasing gases that made people hallucinate. No one knew the truth, and the authorities refused to give details. They just said the situation is under control. But something about the town didn't feel under control at all. Daniel noticed his lights flickering randomly, and his TV would sometimes turn on by itself, showing static for a few seconds before going black again. His phone battery started draining faster than usual. Even the radio made strange noises at night, bursts of static mixed with faint, rhythmic pulses that sounded like the same hum he'd heard underground. One evening, Daniel was sitting on his porch when he saw something unusual. A group of men were moving equipment into the restricted area, large metal containers, cables, and machines that looked like power generators. He also saw scientists in white suits entering through a new gate. They didn't look like they were just studying the ground anymore. They looked like they were building something. The next morning, Daniel woke up to find a strange envelope slipped under his door. There was no name on it, no stamp, just a plain brown envelope. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single printed photo, a blurry image taken deep underground. It showed the same chamber Daniel had seen, but this time there was something more visible, a large metallic sphere buried halfway in the ground, with faint symbols glowing across its surface. In the corner of the photo, there was a code stamped in black ink, Project E1974. Daniel's hands shook as he held the photo. Who sent this to him? And what did the code mean? He searched the phrase online, but found nothing. Every site that mentioned it led to dead links or deleted pages. It was as if the name didn't exist at all. He felt a mix of fear and anger. The government had taken over his land, taken his footage. Now it seemed they were keeping secrets from the entire world. That night, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the photo. What if that thing underground wasn't just a machine? What if it was something ancient, something buried long before his house was even built? The symbols looked old, not like any modern design, and the fact that it glowed meant it was still active. Whatever it wasn't dead. A few nights later, Daniel noticed something else strange. The guards who had been posted near the site were gone. The area was quiet again. There were no trucks, no lights, nothing. It was as if they had packed up and left suddenly. He waited until after midnight, grabbed his flashlight, and slipped out of his house. He walked carefully toward the fence, heart pounding when he reached it. He noticed a section had been cut open, like someone had left in a hurry. He crawled through and approached the center of the field. The metal panels that had covered the hole were still there. But one of them had been pushed aside slightly, revealing a small gap. From inside came a faint, familiar sound, the low, steady hum. It hadn't stopped. It was still alive. He shone his flashlight into the gap and saw a faint blue light flickering below. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, not from a person, but from the light itself, like it was pulsing in rhythm. Suddenly, his flashlight began to flicker. His phone, which he had brought to record, turned off completely. The air grew heavy, and the ground under his feet trembled slightly. He backed away, his heart racing. He turned and ran back toward his house, not stopping until he slammed the door shut behind him. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his phone. He tried to call someone, anyone, but there was no signal. For the next few minutes, everything in his house went dead. The lights, the fridge, even his watch. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the power came back on. The next morning, Daniel went to town to find someone to talk to. He found Dr. Harper again, the scientist who had warned him before. She looked tired and frightened, as if she hadn't slept in days. When Daniel showed her the photo with the Project E1974 label, her face went pale. She pulled him into a quiet corner of the cafe. "Where did you get this?" She whispered. "It was left at my door," he replied. "What does it mean?" Dr. Harper looked around before answering. "It's a classified research name. It's been used for decades. The first record was from 1974, an operation to locate objects that were not made by humans." Daniel felt cold all over. "So, you're saying that thing under my house isn't human-made?" She nodded slowly. "It's not a weapon, at least not one we understand. It might be some kind of ancient energy core, or a vessel, or even a containment device. Whatever it is, it reacts to power sources around it. That's why you've been having electrical problems." "Why did they cover it up?" Daniel asked. Her eyes were filled with fear. "Because they can't control it. The last time they tried, in another site years ago, there was an explosion. The entire area went dark for weeks. They swore to keep it secret. I think what you found might be connected to those same objects." Daniel leaned back, trying to breathe. His small town, his quiet backyard, it was all sitting above something ancient, and dangerous. He wanted to believe it was a dream, but the humming in the ground told him otherwise. Before they could talk more, Dr. Harper's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, then quickly gathered her things. "They're tracking me," she whispered. "You need to leave town, Daniel. Get as far away as you can. They won't let this stay hidden forever." She rushed out of the cafe, leaving Daniel sitting there, feeling lost. He looked out the window toward the direction of his home. The horizon shimmered faintly, as if heat waves were rising from the earth, but it wasn't heat. It was blue light, faint and pulsing in rhythm. That night, Daniel packed a small bag. He wanted to leave, but he couldn't. Something inside him wouldn't let go. He stood in his backyard, staring at the fence. The air was still, but he could feel the vibration again, soft but steady under his feet. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he thought he heard something inside the hum. Not just sound, a voice. A whisper so faint it was almost nothing, calling from deep underground. He didn't understand the words, but the message was clear. Whatever was buried beneath him wasn't finished yet. Daniel couldn't sleep that night. The whisper he'd heard kept echoing in his mind, soft but impossible to ignore. He sat near his window, staring out into the dark field where the strange blue light still flickered beneath the ground. Every few minutes, the light would pulse, almost like a heartbeat, and the air would hum faintly. It didn't feel like a machine. It felt alive. He tried to convince himself it was just his imagination, that maybe exhaustion was making him hear things. But deep down he knew something was happening below. Something that wasn't supposed to be awake. At dawn, the quiet town of Havenfield was suddenly filled with noise again. Dozens of military trucks rolled in from the highway, carrying soldiers, scientists, and heavy equipment. Helicopters circled above. Daniel watched from his porch, heart sinking. They were back, and this time they looked prepared for war. He overheard one of the locals whispering. They said it started glowing on its own last night. "No one touched it," another replied, glowing. "It's been buried for who knows how long." What's making it light up now? Daniel knew the answer, even if he couldn't explain it. The object underground was waking up, and somehow it had felt his presence. Maybe when he got too close, he had triggered something. By afternoon, the whole area around his house was surrounded by fences and guards again. Large black tents were set up, and scientists in white suits rushed around carrying scanners and monitors. The hum was louder now, low, steady, and almost musical. It made Daniel's chest vibrate. He stood behind the fence and called out, "Hey, what's happening?" "That's my land." A soldier stepped forward. "Sir, for your safety, you need to stay back." "My safety?" Daniel shouted. "You said that last time. Tell me what's going on." The soldier didn't answer. He just turned away, talking into his radio. Daniel felt a mix of anger and helplessness. He wanted to break through the fence to see for himself what they were hiding. But before he could do anything, someone grabbed his shoulder. It was Dr. Harper. She looked tired and frightened. "You shouldn't be here," she said quickly. "They're about to open it." "Open what?" Daniel demanded. "The chamber," she whispered. "The readings show massive energy inside the object. They think it's powering itself up. They're trying to contain it before it does something unpredictable." Daniel's heart began to race. Contain it? What if you can't? Dr. Harper didn't answer. She just looked toward the fenced area, where workers were lowering a large circular machine into the pit. It glowed faintly with red light, some kind of stabilizer maybe. But even from this distance, Daniel could see it wasn't helping. The blue light beneath the ground was growing stronger. Suddenly the ground shook violently. The soldiers shouted and scattered. Alarms blared. The entire site flashed with blue light so bright it burned Daniel's eyes. Then came a deafening sound, a deep rumbling note that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Daniel fell to the ground, covering his ears. He could feel the vibration traveling through the dirt, through his bones, through his very heartbeat. The sound wasn't random. It felt like a message, a wordless communication that went beyond hearing. For a second he saw something impossible. Faint shapes moving within the light, like shadows of beings made of energy. When the light finally faded, silence returned. But the air felt different, thicker, charged. Daniel looked up and saw that the pit was no longer sealed. The metal panels were gone, thrown aside like paper. From the center of the hole rose a faint mist, glowing blue in the air. The soldiers approached carefully, weapons raised. A man in a dark coat, clearly in charge, shouted orders. "Keep your distance. Containment field in place?" Dr. Harper grabbed Daniel's arm. "We have to go," she said, but Daniel couldn't move. His eyes were locked on the hole. Deep inside, something metallic was emerging, the same sphere from the photo, but much larger than he imagined. Its surface was covered in symbols that flowed and changed like liquid light. As it rose higher, it emitted a low hum, and the surrounding air bent slightly like heat waves on asphalt. The commander shouted again, "Energy spike!" Everyone fall back. The soldiers retreated, dragging cables and equipment. Daniel and Dr. Harper ducked behind a truck as a blinding flash erupted from the pit. When it cleared, the sphere floated several feet above the ground, perfectly still. Then it began to speak. Not with words, but with a strange sequence of tones and vibrations. Some soldiers dropped their weapons and clutched their heads, groaning in pain. Others fell to their knees, as if the sound was echoing inside their skulls. Daniel felt it too, but differently. The sound didn't hurt him. It felt familiar, like the whisper he had heard the night before, but stronger now. He didn't know how, but he understood it. It wasn't angry. It was confused. Dr. Harper looked at him, her face pale. "It's trying to communicate," she whispered, "but not through language. Through resonance." Daniel's heart pounded. "It's not attacking us?" "No," she said. "It's waking up, and it's scared." Before Daniel could respond, the commander ordered the troops to fire. The soldiers hesitated, but then plasma rifles lit up the air, striking the sphere with bursts of red energy. The moment the first shot hit, everything went wrong. The sphere reacted instantly, sending out a shockwave of blue energy. Every piece of metal nearby, weapons, vehicles, even watches, began to twist and float in the air. The sound grew deafening. Lights exploded. The ground itself cracked open, releasing bursts of light. Daniel grabbed Dr. Harper and pulled her behind a fallen vehicle. "Stop shooting," he shouted, though no one could hear him over the noise. The soldiers kept firing until the commander himself was thrown backward by an unseen force. The sphere pulsed once, and everything stopped. Silence. Then slowly it lowered itself back toward the ground. Daniel stepped forward, ignoring Dr. Harper's warning. "It doesn't want to hurt anyone," he said softly. "It's just trying to understand." As he got closer, the surface of the sphere changed. The glowing symbols rearranged into new patterns, shapes that almost looked like letters. Then a faint voice, mechanical but filled with emotion, spoke inside his mind. "Human. Contact restored." Daniel froze. The voice was clear this time. It sounded ancient, yet alive. He didn't know how it was speaking inside his head, but he felt its presence vast, intelligent, curious. Dr. Harper stared at him. "What did it say?" Daniel looked at her slowly. "It knows we're here. It knows we found it." Then, before they could speak again, the blue light vanished completely. The sphere sank back into the ground, leaving only smoke and silence behind. All the machines around them were dead, the air heavy with static. The soldiers were confused and terrified. The commander yelled for medics and ordered everyone to fall back. Dr. Harper checked Daniel's pulse. His skin was cold, but his eyes were wide with shock. "What did you see?" she asked. Daniel looked at her, voice trembling. "It wasn't a weapon. It was a message. Something left behind, maybe by someone who wanted us to find it." She frowned. "A message. For who?" Daniel looked toward the dark pit, his voice barely a whisper. "For us. Or maybe for what comes after us." As the night fell again, Havenfield was silent. The military sealed off the area completely. No news went out. No one was allowed to leave. But Daniel knew it wasn't over. Deep underground, the faint hum returned once more, slower, softer, but still alive. Whatever it was It hadn't gone back to sleep. It was waiting. And Daniel could feel it, a quiet connection between him and the thing beneath the earth. As if the story of mankind had just been touched by something far older and far beyond human understanding.